can I just say one thing firstly? I love the name Eat Sleep Boxing Repeat.
Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. I'm delighted to be joined by Danny. This is a video reacting to what we witnessed last night or the night before, depending on when you're watching this. As Josh Taylor was obviously defeated on his welterweight debut by Ekow Essuman in Glasgow, and this is kind of, I suppose, a what went wrong video, really. Danny, kind of we'll discuss a few topics throughout the length of this video, but yeah, first and foremost, mate, I know you were there. You were in the Hydro on the night. Saw a video. It looked pretty raucous atmosphere in there. But obviously, fight didn't go the way of Josh Taylor. So yeah, kind of give us your thoughts on what you watched and what really went wrong for Taylor.
Yeah, I think to start with, maybe state the obvious, Josh Taylor's not the fighter he was. And I think if we're all being honest, we knew that coming in. Obviously, there was a line of thinking that the extra £7 were helped, but this was sort of question about how much Josh Taylor had left. And in the first 4 or 5 rounds, I thought offensively he was looking really good. And there was a stage I thought, he could potentially force a stoppage here. He was getting the better of those early rounds. I think he never had Essuman badly hurt, but definitely got his attention with some of the shots, pushed him back with some of the shots, and sort of looked like the Josh Taylor of old coming forward. That is, he was shipping a lot of shots, and that only got worse as the fight progressed. I think sixth was the first round of the fight. I gave Essuman, although he did have a bit of success in one of the earlier ones, and then I only gave Taylor, I think, one more round, and even that was a swing round. It was all Essuman there, and it was just the gas tank of Taylor was the main thing. He was able to pull the trigger, which is sometimes a concern when fighters are billed as being shot or past their best. But he, as I say, his gas tank was no match for Essuman, who's obviously an extremely fit fighter himself. And I obviously didn't hear it myself, but apparently on the broadcast, he was heard in the corner, I think maybe after the eighth or ninth round, saying to Joe McNally, "I've not got a lot left here." And the fighters verbalizing that themselves, then, they're really running an empty. And I think it was the 11th or 12th round, which Josh Taylor would have needed to win them both. He barely threw a punch, and that's obviously a sign of how exhausted you are if you're in a career, maybe not defining fight, but career saving fight in front of your own people, and you still can't let your hands go. Essuman's obviously a bad fighter to be in there against if your gas tank's not what it was. He's, as I say, extremely fit, kept coming all night, and was able to in the later stages sort of make up for the technical superiority of Taylor. Why that is, Taylor, I think inactivity later in his career. We saw that with a couple of fighters recently, Lee Wood, Liam Smith. Inactivity when you're in your athletic prime is one thing, but when you're not and you're out of the ring for, I think Taylor's had, 5 fights in 5 years or 4 fights in 5 years. That's a factor. Lifestyle out of the ring, people have questioned. Staying down at 140 pounds too much, leaving Shane McGuigan. These are all things that have been, sort of put forward as theories. Hard to say how much a percentage each one of them is, but one thing for sure, he's a far cry of the fighter who cleaned up at 140. In my opinion, brilliant fighter he was. Hasn't ever really got the credit he deserves, and difficult from here.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic analysis there, mate. Brilliant. Basically touched on everything there. I think a few things that I want to pick up on there, just like I think you're right in what you said straight off the bat. I think we all knew that the best version of Josh Taylor was behind, but it's a matter of what he did have left, I suppose. And whether or not the benefit of another £7 would have played into his favour. And then as you said, yeah, when you're watching the first 3, 4, 5 rounds, you're thinking, you know what? Yeah, no, yeah, maybe this is maybe not. Again, it's not the Josh Taylor, not vintage Josh Taylor as such, but definitely like, oh, here, no, hold on, he's definitely still got something here. But as you said, down the stretch, he didn't have anything, didn't he? Um, Amplified tenfold by Ekow Essuman, who is on the other, like, who is that's his name. He's literally the engine, isn't he? Like, he's his gas tank is one of the best. He's doing well to be fitter than him. So,
Yeah.
like, I think that was kind of I think it was amplified. If he was fighting someone who was, maybe on a similar level to Ekow Essuman, but didn't maybe have as well respected or a great gas tank, would have been a different story. So that maybe didn't play into his hands either. But at the same time, Michael Westman's a brilliant fighter. He's won British title, blah blah blah. Been in with some really good fighters. Been in some really good fights of himself. but as we said, like at a level. So I think that shows maybe now, like for the remainder of his career, whether or not he continues to fight or not, whatever. There, we're not going to be seeing Josh Taylor in the upper echelons of whatever division it would be, say, supposed to stay a welterweight or whatever. But as you said, maybe an underrated career as such, like undisputed champion. That run of fights, even going all the way back to like O'Hara Davis, was when like people were saying that as a real 50-50 at the time. And then from there on out, like the list of fighters that he just beat back to back to back, like it was talk about a tough road to the top. He wasn't getting these favorable matchups, these one sided fights to build his pad his record out. Like he did it the hard way. But yeah, maybe in the long run we're seeing now that is maybe not being great for his career, but he still had a phenomenal career, and whatever he decides to do now, yeah, I think he can leave with his head held high, which kind of comes on to nicely, segues nicely, Danny, to what I wanted to ask you next. It's like, what do you want to see Josh Taylor do? Some would argue that he lost 4 fights in a row now, if you're including that first Catterall one. Obviously, has factually lost his last 3. The Catterall rematch, the Teofimo Lopez fight, and obviously then Ekow Essuman. Not getting any younger. As I said, best days behind him. Do you want to see him hang up the gloves on what would be a legendary career, or do you still think he has something to give?
Difficult one. I think in terms of you touch on rightly at the top end of the sport, world champion fights, it's very unlikely that he'll reach that now after losing to Ekow Essuman. He's a name that will always be able to command fights of a certain level. And the thing is in boxing, until you're stopped, if you're a big name, you'll always have a bit of value because promoters will always be willing to pay for their fighter to be the first person to stop you. And being the first fighter to stop Josh Taylor is a big scalp and a good accolade. And it's not that's I would hate for that to be how he goes out, fodder for fighters coming up. And I wouldn't want to see his legacy tarnished and people, forget about what he did achieve because, their recollection of him as this fighter who got a fortunate decision off Jack Catterall, then lost 3 fights or 4 fights in a row, 5 fights in a row, got stopped a couple of times. I would hate for that. I think Josh Taylor wouldn't want that for himself. The only fight that I would maybe like to see Josh Taylor carry on for is Conor Benn if he was to return at 147 pounds. We've talked about it loads, in WhatsApp groups and on camera a couple of times as well. I think the build up would be fantastic. I think it's a close fight. I think it's a competitive fight, and I don't necessarily like people will probably off the back of the fight with Essuman make Conor Benn a big favourite, but I don't really necessarily see it that way because Conor Benn himself is a fighter whose gas tank people have questioned. All right, he showed a better gas tank than we have has in the past against Chris Eubank Jr. and that was fought at a high pace. But he's not an Ekow Essuman level of fitness, and he's really dangerous for the first 3-4 rounds of a fight, and then fire does seem to leave, and he doesn't really get too many late stoppages. And Josh Taylor showed good punch resistance. That doesn't seem to have left him. He was never really hurt. I mean, there was one point where he sort of fell back onto the ropes, and that was, some people were saying the same thing happened to Essuman, and maybe the ropes kept him up. I didn't see it that way. Essuman's not a massive puncher. You'd say Ben a bigger one punch puncher, but I think that's a good fight for him. It's a big money fight. Although when saying that, I'm not sure if it's worth the risk from a matchroom point of view. Ben's linked to like mega fights. Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney, Chris Eubank Jr. rematch, and Josh Taylor. Although it'll be a big fight domestically, it's not an international super fight like some of the other ones. So I'm not sure they would risk it. That's one I'd like to see him carry on for. If there was other fights of that level of difficulty that were big enough, I would be happy for them. I don't think there are ones. To be honest, I think aside from that, it's as I say, he's going in as a big B side to up and coming young fighters where he'd be a bigger underdog, and I wouldn't want to see him take fights like that.
Yeah, hitting the nail on the head, mate. I think. Yeah, I mean, me personally, huge respect for Josh Taylor. I mean, like, still remember how EP had to dig for that Regis Prograis World Boxing Super Series fight. Like that was one of his best wins at the time. Prograis being he was an undefeated fighter at the time, kind of touted as the best super lightweight in the world. And like, yeah, I think I would like to see him. Yes, okay, he's lost his last 3, arguably his last 4, but like, it's still at a decent level. I don't want to see it's the same with any fighter. I mean, who are we to say for someone to retire? But at the same time, like you don't want to see some of one of the best fighters of the past decade, in Britain going out as you said as fodder. I don't want to see that. Caveat that what you said, the one name I knew you were going to say, that's why I smiled as soon as you said it, because I think you and I have actually chatted about it on a video. Like, yeah, I think the build up would be brilliant as well. Like, you can just tell, like, especially straight up to the weight cut, like fight week and all. They would not be taking any slack from each other. I reckon that would be a bit tense.
Yeah.
I would love to see that Ben fight if he was to continue, but right hand on heart, I would prefer to see Josh Taylor sail off into the sunset on what has been a remarkable career and forever go down in history books as an undisputed champion. But if not, loads of money to be made there for the Conor Ben fight. He'd make millions for that. Depending on what his motivation is now, if he made those millions and then and then retired, so be it. He'd be an even more wealthy man than I'm sure he is already. But yeah, personally wouldn't mind seeing him hanging the gloves up on what's been a truly remarkable career. Danny, thanks very much for joining me. We could speak about this on this topic for a good while, but yeah, that's all we've got time for, unfortunately, guys. Let us know in the comments what you want to see Josh Taylor do next. What went wrong against Ekow Essuman? Can he come again? Are there any other names you want to see him in there with at welterweight, or do you want to see him hang up the gloves as well? If you're not doing so already, hit that subscribe button, like this video as well, and Danny and I and the whole rest of the team will be back for more videos thick and fast in the coming weeks. Cheers.
Thank you, mate.